Hi, welcome to another Life is All About Choices. I'm really excited to share my guest with you this week. Her name is Aly, and I know I tell you guys that every week, like I'm really excited to share my guest with you, but I am really excited to share my guest with you, and we're going to be talking mostly about millennials today. So join us. Aly, I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
You are so amazing. I'm so excited that we've connected, and while we were chatting, we decided to do this conversation. I'm really, really excited about this.
Me too. And talk about fate, right? I mean, you live literally, like 5 minutes down the road from me? Like, who knew?
Exactly. While I'm here, it's like, oh my gosh, while I'm here, why didn't I meet you sooner? That's crazy. So before we go any farther, please tell us who you are, what you do, and why you're so fabulous.
I love this question. When I was creeping other videos that you've done, I love this question.
Good.
So my name is Aly Brine. I am a career alignment coach. So I work primarily with women who want to stay in the corporate world, but they want to find a career that they are actually passionate about. Crazy concept, right?
I love that because when we talked before, you said that there's so much, I'm going to call it hype. Not that that's my word. That was not your word. Around you can't be happy in your work unless you're working for yourself. And I think that's an important part. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like that's the myth that we have been fed for so long. We can't be happy in your job unless you work for yourself. And I'm here to call shenanigans on that completely. I fully believe that you can find a position that you are passionate about and that you enjoy and lights you up and that you love in the corporate world, because not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. And that's okay. You
Absolutely.
don't have to be.
Absolutely. I totally agree. So now tell us what makes you so fabulous.
Oh, what makes me so fabulous? All of the above.
Well, the fact that you're having this video conversation with me makes you fabulous. I know, because I tend to attract fabulous people, right? Like attracts alike. So, hey.
Yes.
But tell me, I have a couple ideas in my head why I believe you're so fabulous. So
okay.
Tell me.
Let's see. I'm kind of curious. I want to know what you think makes me so fabulous.
Okay, so one of the things that I think makes you so fabulous is number one, your energy. You know, when I talk to you, when I see your posts, and some of the things when I was creeping around through Facebook and social media and looking at stuff that you do before I connected with you, I felt like she is such a soul sister. She really is happy, and she's spreading happiness and love and light. And she is a millennial who has got her stuff together. And I really like what you said about, and I may get it wrong, so feel free to correct me. You said, are you a woman who has the Louis Vuitton bag and with crystals inside?
Yes, that's pretty much it. So one of my questions to get into my Facebook group is, do you have crystals in your Louis Vuitton or maybe your Chanel? So often we don't think of those two things going together, right? So I describe myself in some of my messaging and my branding as being a little corporate, a little hippie, a lot of hustle. So I went to business school and I worked in a Fortune 31 company, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, I'm sure. But I have all these very like traditional corporate type values in how I was raised and how I've come up in my career. But at the same time, I've got like stones on my bracelet, and I've got I just signed up to do like an Akashic record reading session and quantum feedback and like all these crazy hippie things that people kind of look down on and think are weird, especially in the corporate world. And I was all about it. I was working in refining and I had crystals on my desk. And so yeah, that's definitely one of my questions to get into my.
Well, the thing that I loved about your question is crystals in the Louis Vuitton bag, because what you're saying this is how I took it, and this is what I took away from it. There are so many people that think those lives are separate. Like, if you are into holistic modalities, you can't be abundant or prosperous in a financially abundant and prosperous way. And that's what really like drew me to you. Like, look at her. I love this.
Yes, I love that, Ty. And I love my crystals, and I love being a little bougie with Louis, so can't help myself.
There you go. See? And that's a thing. That's one of the another thing that I think makes you so fabulous is that you're just really open with, it's okay to be bougie. It's okay to be loving whatever you do and whatever lights you up. It's like, and if my grandson heard me say this, he would say, "Oh, Grammy, you're too old to say this," but I'm going to say it anyway. It's like, you be you.
No, exactly. I mean, I feel like we're all here for such a unique purpose.
Yes.
And we all think that, you know, my purpose, I guess, how should I say this? We're like fed the idea that you're in here for this unique purpose, but at the same time, society wants to keep you in a box. So if your purpose is something different, then society goes, I don't know about you. Like, you're weird or different or whatever. And I loved being able to kind of break some of that mold in the corporate world, especially, and kind of start to open up people's ideals and questions and minds. And one of my taglines is too that I'm questioning the status quo in the corporate world, because I'm over some of the thought processes in the corporate world. And I think that this pandemic too, and this crisis that we're going through, is really opening a lot of eyes to some of the issues in the corporate world that are happening. So I'm really, really curious to see how that mindset shifts after this whole thing starts to settle down a little bit.
Yeah, after we come out on the other side.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's another thing that I think makes you so fabulous. So see, if this, we could call this video like the 10 things that Nancy thinks makes Aly so fabulous video.
Love it.
But the some of the concepts that you're talking about, there are women who aren't really grasping that until they get into their 50s and up. And that's one of the things that I just feel like makes you such a soul sister to me, because, you know, do you mind, should we say how old you are on screen or no?
Sure.
How old are you?
I'm 29.
29. Okay. So see, you're young enough to be my daughter. Not quite young enough to be my granddaughter, but you know, you're young enough to be my daughter. And the thing is that, you've got this down. And, you know, this, these segments that I do, these videos that I do, they're all about talking with people who have been through some type of a dark night of the soul. And after they've come out of it, they take what they've used to inspire, motivate, and empower others. And I'm not saying that you're never going to have some challenges in your life, but what I see in you is that you've pretty much like jumped over that, you know, like you're like, oh no, I don't need to have that experience because I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt, and it's like, that was nothing. And you keep going. And I think that that's what makes you such a great leader in what you're doing with Millennials.
Well, thank you. I know my fiance and I were actually talking earlier about, you know, this dark night of the soul type question. And I was, you know, throwing some ideas around with him. And I agree. I've been incredibly fortunate in my life. I've always had a really strong support system, and it's always been financially comfortable and economically comfortable. And I haven't had to go through a lot of those struggles and things. And that may sound pretentious, but it's really helped to shape who I am and how I've got to where I am, for sure. But I think too, when people answer that question, there's always a lot of trauma involved, right? And for most people, yes, there has been a trauma if you're sharing stories openly and things along those lines. But there are people who haven't gone through that experience. And more people, I feel like, need to stand up and say, like, I haven't gone through something horrible. I'm incredibly grateful for that fact, obviously. And I appreciate what you've gone through. And I appreciate that you are strong enough and brave enough to share your story after you've gone through this issue. But at the same time, like, I still am, my story's still worthwhile, even though
Absolutely.
there hasn't been this horrible issue along the way. So,
Well, and it speaks to what our karmic journey is. Everyone is born with their own karmic journey. And some of us need to have this incredibly uncomfortable experiences in order to fulfill our karmic journey and do the work that we're here to do as light workers on this planet. And but that doesn't mean that every soul chooses that type of a karmic journey. So it's not about like, oh, you had to do it because you had it really rough and you're so lucky because you didn't have it rough. Because I believe 100% that even after someone has experienced something that's particularly challenging and they've worked through it and they've released it and they're now using it to inspire, motivate, and empower others, that doesn't mean that they're never going to come up against something again. Absolutely. The thing is, it's like now we have, we're better equipped with how we go through it because we can recognize it. We can put it to a stop right away. And so it's not about, whose stuff is worse or whose stuff is better. Yeah. That's like saying like, oh, my childhood was bad. Oh, really? Well, you should hear about mine. Or, oh, my mother's rotten. Oh, well, you should hear about, I mean, when we talk about it that way, then what are we doing? Our thoughts and our words create form. And so if that's like the one thing that I just keep stressing to people, it's like, mind your thoughts, mind your words. What are you putting out there? Because that's what's coming back to you.
Right. So it's so interesting that this topic has come up while we're talking. So before we got on this call, I was actually looking through some of my older LinkedIn posts that I had done and watching a couple of videos, trying to get some inspiration on what I wanted to talk about today on the platform. And one thing showed up for me, and I rewatched this whole 3-minute video. I'm not one who usually gets triggered by a lot. I tend to be very kind of level-headed and chill. But this content creator on LinkedIn had posted at the beginning of all this epidemic going on and basically said, if something good is happening to you, now is not the time to be sharing it. You need to keep that to yourself because other people are experiencing really low moments right now. And that triggered me like no other because I was like, we're in a freaking dark time right now and you're telling us to hide our light? Are you serious? No, I'm not getting behind that. I fully believe that you as a consumer of social media need to be aware enough on social media of what is going on. So if I have a trauma or something going on, heavy, challenging, whatever, maybe I shouldn't be on social media in that moment. I shouldn't be asking someone else to behave differently because of how I am handling things and how I'm reacting to things.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying, I'm having a really bad day, so everybody else needs to have a bad day with me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I was just like, we need to be sharing the light right now.
Exactly.
We need to be sharing the positive things that are happening in the world because the news is so filled with horrible, negative, awful things. And I want to see the positive things that are happening.
And there is so much positive going on right now.
Yes.
Yeah. We need to get rid of the CNN, constantly negative news. Yes. So now let's go back to, you talked about your education and how you were brought up. Again, I'm always reminding people that it's up to us to master our beliefs. If you have a belief that you can't do something, let's master that belief and turn it around. If you have a belief that, your health is never going to get better. Let's master that belief and turn that around. So it also works the other way when you've created a belief somewhere in the timeline of your life where you have to grow up and live your life a certain way. And I think this is where your story really shines.
Yeah, for sure. So do you want me to talk more kind of about how I ended up where I am currently? Okay. All right. So basically where do I even begin? Let's see. So I did my undergrad at Ohio State University, and I very much was in this place of, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I was never one of those kids who like knew they wanted to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever right off the bat. And I had a couple of friends who were like that, and I wanted to punch them in the face, frankly. And so I did a lot of like trying to figure it out in college. And so I had a lot of conversations with authority figures, so career counselors, my parents, academic advisors, whatever, just trying to figure out what the heck I wanted to be when I grew up. So one day I was getting ready to go to a career fair. I was like, what do I tell these people I actually want to like be and I want to do? So I was like, I like people, recruiter. Okay, I like what they do, so I'm gonna be a recruiter. So that started me on my recruiting path. so I had my undergrad in psych. I came out of school, I was a third-party recruiter, so I had the opportunity to learn about a lot of different jobs that I had no idea even existed. And then after that, I actually ended up working at Ohio State University in career services, so continuing down this like hiring type path. But I was still trying to figure it out. Like I didn't know what I wanted. I knew I wanted to make money along the way, don't we all, right? So after that, I actually ended up in, so as a Fortune 31 company, one of the largest refiners in the country. And it was this company that people like die to get in this company. Like they love working there. They love the people. The experiences are great. There's a lot of professional development that can go on in that company. People retire out of there. Like you basically got to drag folks out of that company. So I'm sitting in this human resources position and I have access to all of these senior leaders. I'm making tons of money. Professional development is at my fingertips. And I start going, yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure about this whole thing. And I loved parts of my job, but I hated other parts of my job. And I kept just seeing this narrative of people moving around and moving up and staying there for life and whatever. And I was just so like, there was so much dissonance going on with myself because I had got to this point. I worked, I kicked my own butt. I worked full time while I went to school full time and got my master's degree. And I did this whole dance of trying to figure out what I thought I wanted to be. And then I thought I got there and I went, oh, okay, like, maybe not. So I actually came across on Instagram, totally out of the blue, a life coach. And I started working with her because I was like, I just want to figure out like what I want to be when I grow up. Like I'm tired of just bouncing around and whatever. And that was really when I first started having to look at myself and start doing the work on me. So often in my exact story and what I see with a lot of my clients and with my friends and whatever was, we've taken these paths where well-meaning authority figures along the way have said, you know what, business, you should major in business. There's always money there, whatever, like you'll do that. So similarly, that's kind of what I did. And then job number one out of school, I went, okay, I'm really good at this, but I don't like it. So let's try job number two. And then you try job number two and you're like, I need more education. Clearly, I'm the problem here. So got my master's and found job number three, was all set for life and went, yeah, no, this isn't what I want to do. This isn't what I like, but I don't know what that is. So that's when I started reaching out for help and trying to figure that out. So that's when I found coaching. That's what led me here today.
Well, and the thing is that the old mentality, thought process, belief is of cause and effect. You know, we have to do this to get that, do this to get that. And now, you know, as people are starting to understand, no, what we really need to do is cause our effect.
I like that.
So the difference in that thinking also will, you know, bring people smack up against their beliefs. Like you said, you had 3 jobs. Well, when I was your age, you know, having more than one job, people said you were lazy, you know, you can't stick with it, et cetera, et cetera. Or young people today, you know, if they say, well, I don't want to go to college. And then you have the older generation saying, okay, well, you're never going to amount to anything, or you're never going to be able to X, Y, and Z. And it's about, what are you passionate about? What lights you up?
Exactly. I tell my clients, we can make anything logical, right? We can figure out how to make anything practical, but you have to be willing to stick with it along the way. You have to be passionate enough about whatever it is to potentially, if you have to make a sacrifice in the short term for the long term, like you have to be willing to do that. We can make anything practical, but you have to want it bad enough to make that happen. That's exactly it.
And that's knowing, is it something you want, or is it something you were taught that you want?
Yes, exactly.
And
That's
I
a
think,
really good point.
and that's what you learned. You know, you
Yep.
got to a point where you said, okay, I listened to the parents, the grandparents, the people, the coaches, the administrators, all these people who knew so much more than I do. And I say that with air quotes because, you know, I actually have a couple of videos out there where I've talked about that. It's like, you know, these people who know so much more than I do, who are teaching me. And then when you stop and ask the question, but who taught them?
Oh yeah.
You know, and it's like, so it's not just about like, well, I learned this before you, so I know more than you. It's like, well, maybe that works for you, but that doesn't mean it works for me. Because
Yeah.
when we start to realize that we are all here to add to the collective, it makes sense that we're not all here out of the same mold.
Yes.
Because it's like a jigsaw puzzle or a tapestry. You don't just make a tapestry with all black. That would be silly, right? You know, it's got all these colors and threads and interweavings and everything. And so everything has to be different, and everyone is different. Like no 2 snowflakes are alike, no 2 people are alike.
Exactly. That's another lesson I had to learn going into my, like, starting my coaching business, because I side hustled for about a year and I couldn't fully bring myself to leave my job because I didn't feel like I knew everything about coaching yet. So I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, if anyone's familiar with that. So I am the achiever and like the learner, and I always want to know more and I want to learn more. And that really got me kind of like stuck for a year in my coaching business, because I was like, oh, but this person has like the hack that I need. Oh, but this person has another like, what's this person doing that's their secret? And I just needed all of this information, and just I kind of went into information overload before I went, stop. Like, you need to stop and fully believe that you have the answers at this point. Yes,
Yep.
I did all of the practical, I did the homework, I learned as much as I could from experts, various experts, and then at some point I had to leap, and I had to believe in myself and believe that I could actually do this and make this happen. So yeah, that was absolutely another lesson I had to learn starting my coaching business along the way too, was to, I have the answers. I know what I need.
Yes, we have to stop listening to those people that say you don't know enough yet. And, you know, with my background being in martial arts, I always liken it to, you go into martial arts as a white belt. And then when you take your first test as a yellow belt, now you can teach yellow belts and white belts. And then the next belt is orange. Now you can teach orange, yellow, and white. And that's how it is. That's how I see life. You know, it's about, okay, so whatever level you are, everyone at your level or below can come to you for, oh, look, you know this, you've learned this. And basically that's what the term sensei means. It's Japanese, roughly translated to before born, meaning my knowledge was born before your knowledge. So it's not about age. I could have a teacher that's, 12, but if he or she knows something that I haven't learned yet, and I want that knowledge that they have, they would become my sensei because their knowledge was born before my knowledge. So now it becomes less about chronological anything and more about just the energy of what you're putting out there.
I love that. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. That's why I get so excited. I get so excited. I could talk about that forever. So, I don't want to go over this or anything, but yes. And it makes me so excited. But you said something that I want to hop back to for any of the millennials that may be watching this video. When you talked about you at age 29 and you decided to start your coaching business. Now, I am sure that you've heard this because I have heard it through so many coaches. You're 25 years old. What could you possibly know to coach me? How do you help people get past that? Because it's like, oh, please give me a break. Again, that comes to the whole term sensei, but how do you help the millennials get past that hurdle?
Yeah, I think that that's a really interesting question. And that's something too that they need to work on in the corporate world a little bit. So there's this concept in the corporate world. So we're all familiar with mentoring and the idea of pairing with a mentor. So in traditional mentoring, you have a senior person, typically in age, and a junior person who is the mentee learning from the senior person. So there's another concept in the corporate world called reverse mentoring, which is where the younger person is actually teaching the older person. And I love that concept. And I share that with so many people just because we've talked before too about how there's so much to learn from the different generations, right?
Yes.
There's so much to gain. So I did a lot of nannying in college, and I learned so much from those kids, just how to be free and enjoy the day. And there's just little things along the way. So it's really just bringing people back to experiences like that. Like, yes, we can learn from our elders and respect our elders and whatever else, but what can you learn from your 2-year-old? Like, what can you learn from the kids in your life or the younger people? There's just so many valuable lessons coming from all of those generations. So that's kind of how I help to bring people to that realization, is just bring up like a simple example like that. Like, what do you as a 29-year-old learn from a younger person? I know I learn from my 20-year-old cousin all the time when I'm like, can you tell me what the TikTok is?
No, I hear you. And it's like, I always say that if you want to be really good at what you do, make sure that you have a lot of millennials around you, because, millennials, you guys, you process things differently. And even my daughters are 38 and 39. So, there will be times when I'll say, oh, I'm going to X. And they'll like, seriously, why don't you just do this? And I'm like, oh yeah, that would be much easier. And it's funny because I know there were a few times when my mom, and she's 82, and she's like, oh, well, I have to look it up in the yellow pages. And I'm like, seriously? I mean, just get on your smartphone. And she's like, oh, okay. Or she'll be nervous because the new phone book hasn't arrived or something. I'm like, you don't need a phone book. But, it's about, again, it's about letting go of what no longer serves us and embracing the fear of stepping out of what you know.
Yeah. And I think letting the ego go on that too. Like, we could have, in those moments, you could have been so judgmental of mom and been like, seriously, like, you're an idiot. Why would you still be using the yellow pages? Like, whatever, but that's her comfort zone, right?
Yeah.
That's what she's familiar with. That's what she knows, what she's good at, what she understands. So yes, you can suggest like, hey, like, here's another way you can do it. It's so much faster. And that goes both ways, right?
Well,
I
I think
taught my
it's about,
80-year-old grandpa how to Skype the other day.
yes. Well, and I think it's about, if you're going to step in and, I was going to say criticize, but that's not the word that I'm looking for. If you're going to step in and say, you don't need that anymore, or encourage someone to step out of what they know, their known zone, then be ready to have an alternative of what they can do. You know, not just leave them hanging.
Yeah.
Like, are you serious? You don't need the yellow pages anymore, and then walk away. You're like, well, that would be really, arrogant. But if you say, oh, let me show you how this can do. And then if they choose to embrace it, great. If not, then, but that's where people have to allow everyone to be where they are. And that's about, practicing the art of non-judgment.
Yes, absolutely.
So see, now in the corporate world, though, you have the opportunity to teach the word sensei, before born. So it's not about mentor, mentee, and reverse mentoring and giving things labels. It's just about, hey, Susie in that cubicle over there knows how to do exactly what it is you're trying to learn. Why don't you go talk to her? Doesn't matter what the age, it doesn't matter the gender, it doesn't matter the sexual preference, nothing, the color, nothing matters.
Mm-hmm. I think that's one place where I really struggled too in my HR career. The last site I was at was a union site. So it was all very much based in the seniority and that
Hierarchy.
whole mentality. And that was a struggle for me because I was like, I don't care how old you are. Can you do the job? Like, I don't care.
Yes. Well, and I really feel that, it's been a long time since I was in the corporate world, but I have seen, it's been my experience that a lot of times now people aren't promoted or in a position that they're in because they're necessarily qualified. It's more because they've been there the longest and somebody said, well, you've been here the longest, we'll give it to you. But that doesn't mean they're good at leadership or they're good at mentoring or, being empathetic or sympathetic or putting themselves in someone else's position and really saying, oh, let's think this through from all sides. And so it's about love.
For sure.
Like, what are you putting out that constitutes love, and what are you bringing back that constitutes love? So if you're putting out these fear-based things of like, well, I've been here 2 weeks longer than you, so I should have that, rather than the, yeah, again, that's all about cause and effect.
Right. And that brings it back to the ego again, too. Like, if you're having that discussion, like, where are your insecurities lying in that? What reflection, what work do you need to be doing on you before you go criticizing everyone else around you?
Well, because the answer is always inside of us. And that's why I get so excited about encouraging people to do the inner work. Yes. Because when you're having a challenge with another person, it's not about that other person. It's about what is showing up that you have the opportunity to learn. So if, older generation is really having a hard time taking direction from a younger person, that's their opportunity to say, oh, what could I learn from this? What's coming up for me? Now, depending on their beliefs and their thought process and stuff, that might seem like a bunch of woo-woo, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, but I want nothing to do with that. So, but this is why when we share this information, why I'm so excited to have this conversation with you, because it really is about, I don't know, just all joining hands, and it's not about age.
No, it's just about having conversations and understanding and talking. Like, and one thing so whenever my fiance and I get in the car, we have like really deep conversations in the car. Like, that's always our place. So a couple of times here during quarantine, since gas has been so cheap, we've just been getting in the car and driving. So one of our recent conversations was actually about like, from let's say like a political standpoint. So if you are pro-Trump and someone is anti-Trump, we've been conditioned to go like, nope, I don't like you, you're different from me, I
Yeah.
can't do this, no. Whereas instead, we would get so much more out of that conversation growth-wise if we could say, look, I don't know a lot about whatever the topic is. Why don't you tell me your thoughts on it? Like, tell me your opinions. Why do you think that way? What kind of led you? Why are you pro-Trump, or why are you pro this or anti that or whatever? And putting that ego aside and being able to say, you know, I don't know a lot, or tell me more, is really going to just open the conversation. And then having the ability to still step away from that conversation and go like, okay, cool. Like, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I think that's a really interesting point. Like, we don't always have to be right or wrong. It's okay to not be an expert. It's okay to not have all of the knowledge. Sorry, Google just decided she was going to start talking over here. But it's okay to not be experts in everything. It's okay to not be, or not have an end all be all opinion on whatever the topic is. Learn from each other and then walk away and go, okay, like, you don't have to change my mind or convince me. Like, just teach me.
Well, and to your point, what I hear you saying as well is that it teaches us that our beliefs are open for debate.
Mm-hmm.
And that is really a very, very powerful way to live, because I was talking about this in a workshop that I was doing yesterday, and it was about fear. And I said, you know, so many people say, well, I have fear, but they don't go deeper. They think, well, I'm just afraid. So in other words, like, someone might think, oh, I'm afraid of going outside. So they live their life like, I don't like to go outside, I'm afraid to go outside. But when you delve into it, then you find out, no, I don't like birds, and birds are outside. Now you realize, like, oh, I'm not afraid to go outside, I just don't want to be around the birds. See, it changes your whole like outlook on life, and everything opens up, and you're like, oh, you know, like the choir starts singing, you're like, look at this, I have freed myself up so much. And so, you know, it's about really getting into these fear-based thoughts and ideas, and, you know, asking yourself, like, okay, well, that makes me afraid, so let's figure out why this makes me afraid. And to have a debate with someone, you know, pro-Trump, anti-Trump, it's like, well, why do you like him? Why don't you like him? And as you were saying that, it kind of like, it's been a long time since I was in high school, but, you know, remember in high school when they used to have those debates, you know, and they would, but they would just give you a topic, like, you know, it's just something random, and you have to be for this, and you have to be against this, and you have to tell people why. And so because there was no emotional attachment to the outcome other than a good grade, right? So, so if that's what we can do, is not be emotionally attached to the outcome. It's not about proving somebody wrong and proving that you're right. It's about allowing each person to have their understanding of how they want to understand it. And if during the conversation you learn something new that you're like, oh gosh, well, that's a good point. But then usually why people like stay stuck is because, you know, any change, no matter how minute it is, it brings up fear. And when people feel fear, they attack. I mean, hello, every science fiction movie since The Blob in the 60s, you know, there's something wrong, attack, we don't know what it is, attack. And so you get, you know, all these sci-fi movies and everything, it's like aliens are coming, attack, kill, you know, and it's like, what if we learn to just observe? And that's the same way it is with generations. Instead of like, oh, millennial, ooh, something's wrong with them, you know? And it's like, oh, but what would I learn if I really got to know them? And I remember years ago, I heard Jack Canfield talk about this story where there were two deer in the woods, and this really young deer was looking at the older deer, I guess you call it a buck, and he was thinking, oh my gosh, look at him with his antlers, and he's so regal, and he has such big antlers, and I just know that he's been on this earth for a really long time. I think that if I had the opportunity to spend time with him, there's so much that he could teach me. And then likewise, the older deer, buck, whatever you call it, is looking at the younger deer and saying, look at that young doe. He's so fresh and new. And I bet I could learn a lot from him if we had the opportunity to hang around. And then both of them say, but why would they want to hang around with me?
I love that.
And that's what I think of with millennials. It's like, oh my gosh. And I think anyone with grandchildren, like my 5-year-old granddaughter, I watch her on the iPad or the phone, and she figures things out, and I'll be like, how did you do that? You know? And this is why, because she just pushes buttons. She's not afraid of anything. And that's what we all need to do. It's like, just push the buttons. Unless you work in an atomic factory, then don't be pushing buttons.
Push that one.
But you know what I'm saying? It's like, just be open, stop trying to create your abundance, your prosperity, your love, your relationships from the outside in, or from what someone told you it needs to be, someone else's version of what life is like or needs to be like. And this is how I feel that you're doing this so well with the people that you're working with.
Well, thank you. Your story actually made me think of another experience that I've had in the corporate world too. So I had the opportunity in my position to be in the room with a lot of senior leaders. So I was typically the youngest person in the room, and typically the only female too, but I was in these rooms with these senior leaders, and I had a lot of friends who were just kind of like entry-level type engineers at the time. And so they didn't have access to these senior leaders that I had. And so they would always be like, oh my gosh, if I could just talk to so-and-so, or if I could just learn from so-and-so, or whichever leader it was. So we got a new division manager, and his office was just down from mine. And he was like head honcho over the whole plant. And he would come by my office and just like stand in my doorway and just eat his Cheerios out of a bag and just be like, how's your Monday? Like, what's up? And like, we got to spend all this time together at like a golf outing and an event and whatever. And so still to have all of these people just like revering these senior leaders and being like, oh my gosh, like they must know so much and like whatever else. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's just like so-and-so. He's in here eating Cheerios all the time or stealing my candy. Like, it's just kind of like humanizing them too. Like, yes, absolutely, there's a lot to learn from them, but we need to take them off of these like pedestals, like these, they want to talk to you as much as you want to talk to them. They just might have a little less time to talk to you.
Exactly.
Such a good point too. Like, you're both kind of like unsure of each other, but at the same time, you're just people. Like, I don't care what your title is. You're just people and human.
Yeah, it's almost like we have to get rid of the titles, and humanize the workforce rather than titling the workforce. Because, I always used to say when I was working in the corporate world that the CEO isn't any more important than the janitor. Because if the janitor's not doing what he or she needs to do, the CEO can't get done what he needs to do. So when you realize that it's all just interwoven again, everyone is bringing their best to the table, and it's about reciprocity.
For sure. Absolutely.
So Aly, tell people, like tell people how they can get a hold of you. What's the best way to contact you? If someone is, listening to this and says, oh my gosh, I'd love for her to just give me some more information. How do they connect with you?
Yeah, so I live on LinkedIn. So I am all about LinkedIn. That's kind of my primary platform. I post on there every single day. I'm posting all kinds of information, free tips, how you can work with me, all that fun stuff on LinkedIn. I also have a website, so that's alybrine.com. But LinkedIn's going to be my primary resource for you. So I would love to connect.
So now I know sometimes on LinkedIn, depending on, what level or 6 degrees of separation people are, it can be difficult. So if someone wanted to connect with you in a different way, is there any other way like as a step in?
Yeah, so you can shoot me an email at, it's hello@alybrine.com. So pretty simple.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, Aly, thank you so much for being here and sharing your time and your energy and just your beautiful essence. I really appreciate you sharing time with me.
Thank you. This has been a pleasure, and I appreciate you having me and telling me about all these things that I do that are fabulous.
Oh, see there? All right. And for all of you that are watching or listening to this video and something's come up for you, we really would appreciate it if you would share it. Subscribe to the channel, because this channel is all about giving people a place to go where they're having real life situations and they want to hear stories or messages from real life people who have been there, done that, and are now coming out on the other side and really making their mark on the world and helping others make their mark on the world. So sharing this, getting the message out there, letting people know like, hey, oh my gosh, I listened to this and there were a couple nuggets in there that I really, felt needed to be paid attention to. So subscribe, let other people know. This is how we pass the love. This is how we share the love, and just let people know, look, we're all in this together. We're all in this thing called life together. So I really appreciate you being here, taking your time to listen to us. Aly, again, thank you for being here. And for all of you listening, please remember that life is all about choices. In the meantime, this is Nancy Mueller saying ciao for now.